I want us to do a little exercise on whatever gadget you have, phone, your laptop. Go to menti.com, www.menti.com, and when you're there, log in that code 51316597. Because we are 52 in the room, it's not feasible for us to stand up and introduce each other, but we can. Oh, okay, go ahead. So you've got 3 chances of saying who you are. I love that somebody loves themselves. That's really awesome. President. Any set of words that describe you would be great. Who is an advocate? Humanitarian. Okay. Who's president? Love it, love it. Okay. Let's move to the next question. Who would you rather have lunch with? You have 3 options, so you can pick more than one person. So far, Wangari Maathai is in the lead. And then we have Viola Davis. Interesting. And then Oprah. Ooh, Barack. Barack is married, Ninyi wasichana. You better know that. It's not on this list that you would like to have lunch with. Yes? Tanzanian president. Elon Musk. Okay, let's move on to the next question. As we now get into the equality conversation, what comes to mind when you hear the word equality? No right or wrong answers. Any buzzword that comes to your mind when you hear the word equality? Wow, unavoidable. That's interesting. Who wrote unavoidable? Why?
Because that's something that we are fighting for. We want equality, so it's totally unavoidable. We can't run out of it.
That's what you meant. Okay, so dimensions of equality is our starting point, and we've got political equality, we've got economic equality, we've got social equality. If you think of any form of inequality, it'll more likely than not fall under these 3 broad dimensions of equality. And you can think through any right now and you'll just see that how it's situated. Let me just say that it's not a linear positioning, which means that some things could have a legal, political dimension and could also have an economic dimension. But you can find where it could be ideally situated. So let's start with political equality. And the reason I began with political equality is because political equality sort of gives permission for economic equality and social equality to exist. Oftentimes, if you take a dip through history, you will see of societies and jurisdictions and communities that began first by having political equality. There was a clamor for political equality first, then that gave the foundation, the bedrock to have economic equality and social equality. So the first step is political equality. Something that's really key in political equality is citizen participation or public participation. For example, in Kenya, we want to govern ourselves. That was a political move. It then gave us political equality. The first president, Kenyatta Sr., had this document called the Sessional Paper Number 10 of 1965. And in that paper, they wanted to dismantle 3 ills: poverty, illiteracy, and disease. I don't know how far we are with some of these, at least literacy, at least that we've been able to, especially with the introduction of free primary education. And something that we take for granted in the Constitution is the concept of public participation. Think about a pyramid. A pyramid has a very thin apex at the top. It means you've got very few people at the top, and you've got more people at the base, right? So the base is chunky. And when the base is chunky, it means that's the electorate. They form a very sturdy base. It is because of the electorate that we can even have a political elite, right? The most important person are the people who hold this structure together. The people who actually make the decisions, ideally in a democratic state, should be the people. And that's why public participation is such a core element of political equality.
Most of what I see is people are asked to, submit memoranda. The leaders don't actually go to the people. So you find that a lot of people don't know how to submit memoranda, like let's say if it's a bill or something that needs to be passed, and they don't even know how to prepare petitions to be able to complain about something. And even when they participate or they go for public participation, it is not effective. The people who come there mostly are probably men or people who are known to the politicians. So the audiences in the public participation fora are not representative of the whole population. What they usually do is public participation is supposed to be interactive, so that you talk to the government, they implement, and then they get back to you. But in most cases, you find that there is no feedback to the mwananchi, and whatever they actually just go for public participation for the sake of going for public participation. But what the mwananchi says in most cases is not implemented, and that's why they don't come back to tell you that we didn't do this, because they didn't consider it in the first place. They just do it for reports.
First reason as to why we are having issues with public participation is because counties do not have public participation bills or even a legislation that guides public participation. And with that, the county government tends to do what they feel is right to them. In this case, I'm talking of Busia. Sometimes we do public participation in maybe the budget. When the budget goes to the people, it is not considered that we are doing public participation in the county level until the ward level or even the village level, but it's just done once. They say there will be a public participation, then people come to a county hall, then either 10, 20, the number is not even considered, then it is passed. And it comes to the county assembly without documentation of who were present, how many youths were present, how many women were present, how many people were present. Like the representation, the equal representation is not there.
I wanted to say something. For me, I feel public participation is a facade. Like it's just there because most of the time, yes, it is in the constitution, but the way it's just done because it's there, supposed to be done. You see that, and that is why we have so many reasons. Because you'd realize most of our people actually don't understand why they are there, and you'd find that most of the people who are in the offices or the political people are the one mobilizing people to just come and sit and pass it, and then it ends like that. And
but number one, I want to highlight when it comes to public participation, the notices are in the newspapers. How many of us can afford a newspaper?
And
that
the notice
is number
is
one.
today for tomorrow.
And it's today for tomorrow. That is number one. And number two, why can't we also leverage on technology, right? We know the government has digitized so many services when it comes to e-citizen. Like, it's not all the time actually I can participate in those forums because the notice is like 1 day too. But I can give my feedback if I actually can access those documents. Half the time, even the county government's websites are not updated. So you can't even tell whether we have public participation coming up in a month. But if I could actually go online, go to the website, and it's actually updated, and I can get this information, I can access these documents, I can actually give my feedback. So we also need to tap into other people who necessarily cannot actually come to this public participation forums.
So when we talk about in the Kenyan context, and we have things like ability to protest. As somebody who's been arrested, I really value that right in this country. We have a right to present petitions, to picket, and to protest. If I am unhappy about a certain thing that is a public policy governance issue, I can actually pick a placard and go to the streets. The last protest that I went to was maybe 2 months ago, when the unfortunate incident of the girl who was harassed, assaulted in her vehicle on Forest Road. And so there was a protest that was convened by some human rights organizations, but I felt the need to just go because that scene would have been me anytime. When I leave the gym and I'm in tights and a vest and somebody just decides to harass me, that could be me, that could be any one of us, right? So that was the last protest that I went to, but that's a right we didn't have just 20, maybe not 20, maybe 30 years ago, right? There's a story that I really like. It's a story of the mothers of political prisoners. I met some of these mothers in 2019, and the story came alive for me. During the dictatorial regime of President Moi, he would arrest everybody at his whim and fancy. right? You don't look good, arrest. You're Wangari Maathai, you're too strong, I don't like your dreadlocks, arrest. And every single thing was an issue during that time. And so people were always treading really carefully and walking on eggshells. And what happened this time is that, so he arrests these young boys because at the time universities were the center of a lot of agitation. That's when you became woke. That's when you became attuned to the inequalities that were happening in our environment. And that's when you stood up, right? And so it was an immediate threat. If you think about the Koigis, all of them began that agitation when they were in uni. So he arrested these young people, these young men, and can you believe the mothers of these men at the time were in their 70s and in their 80s. They were, do you know a mother's love? They were so distressed at the situation that they decided to go on the streets and strike, a hunger strike. Wangari Maathai at the time was much younger than them, but she was the person who would get them food. She would coordinate health supplies, and her role, read her book, Unbowed by Wangari Maathai. It's her memoir, it's her autobiography. The stories you're going to pick up from there. Like when her dreadlocks were yanked from her roots and blood was just trickling on her face. That woman, by the way, that Nobel Peace Prize was long time coming. So they were so agitated by the fact that their sons were not in school, that they'd been arrested by a president who would arrest people and the people would disappear. You know, it's one thing if you're arrested and I know I can come and bail you out. Then, by the way, and let me tell you, let me just backtrack. Bail, rights of an arrested person in the Constitution, those are iconic clauses. Like, we can't take those for granted because at the time they did not exist. You could stay in a cell for months on end, and now that's not possible. Call me, I'll get you out, type of thing, you know? So these mothers were really distressed. They went and staged this hunger strike because the president was not saying anything. The AG at the time, Amos Wako, was not saying anything either. What do we do? Our sons are somewhere and we have no idea how to locate them. It got so bad that these women decided we're not going to eat. But they were so resolute. But let me tell you where, you know, everything has a shift. Everything has a time and chance, I call it. When something just happens that shifts the situation. What shifted the situation was that they had been promised, Amos Wako was telling them, you know, lip service, we'll do, nothing happens. The women stripped their tops and their bras. And because we had a police service that had some people with some sense, they said we cannot see our mothers and our grandmothers bare-chested. They looked away. The international press, CNN at the time, came and covered that, and that image completely remained cemented in the lives and the minds of people to just highlight, by the way, you and your law degree, that's good for you, right? But it's a mother. It's a mother who was so desperate that she stripped her top. And they were bare. If you Google mothers of political prisoners, some of the pictures that will come out are women, old women with no top on them. And when I met some of them who are still alive in 2019, it was such an interesting moment to see how far we had come on the political front. Okay. Okay, 10 volunteers, kimbieni hapa. If you haven't been here before, okay, please move back kabisa. Find your
Someone else coming here.
Come.
No wall, don't.
Find your find a starting point. Just move further. Can you move further behind?
Please don't leave.
Okay. So let's do this. Okay, are we ready? Yes. So the folks in the room, what we are watching, you've understood the game, is we are watching privilege, and we'll see the outcome of that. So because of space, just take a very small step. Okay. If you have always been able to afford and to access sanitary, so that's pads or tampons or menstrual cup. Since you started, if at some point you didn't afford, or are not able to afford, just stand. Since you started your period. Since you began your period. Okay, if you have always been, take a step forward. Have you taken a step forward? Yes, sir. You have. Okay. Sawa. Deep state. Hawa ni watu wa deep state. And you guys, by the way, when I coined the questions, I want you to know this is representative. Yeah. There are people who can't afford menstrual products to date. If you have pursued education beyond high school, take a step forward. Just small. Hey, you're kila mtu. I'm like, even if you have a master's PhD, you see, just a small step. Just a small step. Okay, if you have access to a private medical cover. Access to a private medical cover, not NHIF. If you have flown business class, not economy, business, ile yenye you're only one of you uko. Yeah, just jua watu wa nini. Okay, if you come from the major tribes in the country, and can we interrogate tribal privilege? Kikuyu, Luo, Luya, Kisi. Oh, and Kalenjin. How did I forget that? And Kalenjin. Okay, if you have piped water in your house, because that is a preserve of very few. Maji naingia yani unaweza flash lu. Okay, I like this. I like what I'm saying. Let me say, if you own 2 cars, not 1. Let me change that. If you own 2 cars. If you have more than 1 domestic help, uko na nani, uko na driver. Car wash sio help. Mwenye anaishi kwako, mwenye unapay salary. Did somebody move? Yes. Okay. Fair enough. And do not start befriending her because now you're saying she's a girl for business class. If she's not your friend, don't start now. If you have, this is a bit easy for this class. No, let me remove smartphone. If you have a regular monthly income. I was going to put an amount, but wacha nisilete nini. If you have 3 meals in a day. Na sio ati I'm on a diet. That's by choice. If you can afford and you have, let me skip that one. If you have been interviewed or featured by a media house on the national frontier. Eish, but do we say? Okay, so the next question, I'm changing it. If you vacation internationally at least once a year. If you vacation internationally, yes. By the way, this one is not at umelipiwa na kampuni. This one is umejipeleka Euro trip or Dubai. And the key thing is you do it every year. Twice. Okay, guys, if you have Netflix, Zuku, Safaricom, Fiber, DSTV, subscription, kwa nyumba, kwa sio ofisi. The other one, the last question is if you order takeout via Glovo and Uber Eats at least 3 times in a week. It is the urban lifestyle. Okay, so that's the last question. And the exercise, the goal and the objective of the exercise was for us to see very clearly privilege that people possess. Whenever you get into a room, just know there's a discrepancy. And whenever there's always a power play. So if you're working with communities, for example, you must dismantle paka nguo. don't go to Korogosho in a cab. Why are you going to Korogosho in a cab, right? Do you know that when we do advocacy training, that completely introduces a power dynamic you can't come back from. If you take a cab, shukia mbali, and then come, because bottled water, the power dynamic is so huge that your advocacy efforts will be significantly dwindled. But then also, it's a representation of inequality. So we've got folks who can easily afford a trip, and she saves, as she said, but she can easily afford that. But she's also said, "Akuna glovo kisi."
So she would.
Yeah. So you can also see that discrepancy. We talked about menstrual products and having to always afford it. You, Milka, were not able to afford it at some point, and you did not move as a result of that. We talked about help, access to help. Kenyans feel very bougie when you can access to pay a domestic manager, and obviously you're not going to pay her minimum wage, which is a sad thing. By the all the women in the room, they do not claim to be a feminist if you don't pay your nanny. If you don't pay them, it's now 15,000. Minimum wage is now 15,000 after Labor Day this year. So how are you advocating for women's rights? Yet in your house you're the most toxic human being. You know, allow me to be honest. Let's just interrogate those things, right? If you're for equality, you call yourself an egalitarian. If you're an egalitarian, stretch it along all the facets of your life. With your nanny, with your domestic manager, be as fair as possible. Ladies, please have a seat. So I really want to wind up. We're done with political equality, and I want you to hear from my former boss.
And I'm the Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya, and I've been asked to speak to you about inequalities. I want you to imagine a nation that has the 5th largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, that produces $200 millionaires every year, yet 3 million people go hungry every night. 28 million people are routinely denied their basic human rights, and 50,000 people's homes, many of them single mothers, could be demolished in the interest of 1,000 people, as we saw recently in Mukurukwa-Jenga. As a result, 50% of our population no longer believe that there is equality under the law. It sounds like the system is terribly broken, but it's not. It's designed this way. And furthermore, it's going to get worse. 2 months ago, debt repayments exceeded what the government of Kenya spends on citizens. So, Ms. President, the question I would like to ask you is, what tax structure will you introduce? What stimulus package will you create for the people of Kenya? How will you ensure that they have jobs, that they have productive land, that they have housing, that they have water and health? How will you make sure that all of this happens given our debt structure? Good luck with the campaigns. Good luck with framing your manifesto. And don't forget, inequality is the biggest pillar that you will have to respond to.
So political equality gave you the base, you understand what it means, political public participation, etc. And then it sets the bedrock using legal frameworks and apparatus. Then it cascades very naturally to both social equality and economic equality. The crux of social equality is if you're married or not married, if you're Hindu, Muslim, Christian, if you're a woman or you're a man, if you're old or if you're young, if you've got education or if you don't have education, if you're pregnant or not pregnant, you have access to equal rights. The irony of social equality is that it is hinged on diversity. Social equality would not be social equality if we did not if we were all the same thing, we would possibly not have social equality, right? So regardless of your status and everything else, can you still attain the same services? Can you still hope and aspire to be different things, right? We are talking in the context of a country that has never had a female president, for example. Why is that? We're talking in the context of a country that has board representation that's skewed to the male aside, right? You're talking about a country that potentially, if you disclose your pregnancy during a job interview, you could not get it. It really depends on, and these are things that continue to taint us. We're talking about a country that has stratification. It's not as precise as places like India, where you're born in a caste system, and where you're born, there's no, Dambisa Moyo mentions and says, social mobility. There's no social mobility in India. If you're born in this caste, if you're in the caste that is workers, that's where you will be born, and that's where you will stay. And so you can't even aspire to get married to a guy who's from an upper caste. Like your what is it called? The die is cast, right? On your life, on your fate, and stuff like that. So basically, social equality talks about some of these issues. If you have any form of disability, are you on the same level as somebody who doesn't? And how does society remedy some of these things? Political equality gives us the basis, but social equality makes us who we are, right? And so it's important for us to think about some of these social issues.
Hi there, Ms. President contestants. My name is Janet Mbogwa. I am the founder of Inuadada Foundation, author of My First Time Stories, global gender equality champion, media personality, mother of 2 wonderful boys, and a lot of what drives my advocacy is why I'm here to talk to you today. It's about menstrual injustice. My foundation leads in a lot of work around the advocacy and impact-driven initiatives that seek to bring pads and sanitary products to girls and women everywhere, beginning in our home country, Kenya. Now, I want you to picture this. 1 million girls in Kenya, in fact, just over 1 million girls of school-going age, miss out on an education because they don't have access to pads. Now, it's bad enough if it's just 1 girl, but imagine it's 1 million. And around the world, 500 million women and girls lack access to menstrual products. I actually stuttered there a bit because every time I say it, I'm triggered and upset. I'm actually insulted that menstrual injustice persists, because what this means is that when girls miss out on weeks and weeks on end of school, they are unable to compete fairly with maybe their peers who have access to menstrual products, or with boys. A lot of girls end up dropping out of school. And so that really diminishes their ability to thrive, whether it's to pursue their education further or to even work. When it comes to women as well, they're affected by menstrual injustice. A lot of the time they're unable to carry out their duties with dignity if they don't have access to products or information. And many times they are left to resort to using unsanitary products to manage their period. I have been talking about this issue since 2014, and to think that it's almost 10 years in, yes, there's been progress. We've seen countries like Scotland and New Zealand pursue menstrual justice for women and girls. We've seen countries like Kenya launch policies and frameworks that can help us drive the agenda. But there are still over 1 million girls who are not going to school, and that's where I think you all can come in. Let's collectively advocate and make it known that this issue has to be prioritized. If it isn't, think about all the other issues that it affects. Teen pregnancy comes up as a result of menstrual injustice. The crime cycle is fed because of menstrual injustice. So in a sense, we're all affected in one way or another. And so if that isn't integrated into a bigger development issue, if there isn't enough resourcing, funding, which I can tell you for free, that is the case. Menstrual injustice is hugely underfunded, something that a lot of us are trying to change, a lot of us are making noise about, but it still remains under-resourced, underfunded. That means a lot of the programs that we want to scale to impact even more communities are halted or impeded because of that. I recently launched the pad making machine at Inuadada Center in Korogocho. We will be employing 4 women who are going to be earning a salary through our foundation, and the products used are going to be distributed to girls around that community and beyond. And there's about 7 pad making machines across the country, or there will be by the end of the year. But imagine if we were able to adopt that in every county, in every part of the world. Those are just some of the ways that we can end menstrual injustice. Now, when Joanna asked me to do this video, I forgot to tell her, this is something that's such a big passion of mine. I could talk about it to death. I really could. And every day I wake up, I'm reminded that there are girls and women who depend on us to give them a better chance at life. So, Ms. President contestants, well done. Thank you for taking this step into owning your political leadership voice and to wanting to grow it into something that can impart even more change. I wish you all the best, and just understand that whatever happens from here on out, You have agency, so use that to carry the voices of many others, and more than that, use it to pass it on to others as well. Thank you so much. I hope that someday I'll get to connect with all of you physically, but for now, right here on this video, thank you again, Joanne, for asking me to send this, and all the best to all of you. Thank you for let's this one day at a time, one girl at a time, one story at a time.
Thank you, Janet. And it's very simple in terms of, different countries, different jurisdictions have economic systems and structures that work for them. Predominantly, I think we are a capitalist world. We had socialism in places like Tanzania with Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, which obviously didn't succeed for a myriad of reasons. The difference people ask between socialism and communism, because communism is what Russia, so former Soviet Union, Russia was communist. I think South Korea. Which one? North or South? I always is it South? That's North. Is it North? That's yes. South is capitalist. So it's North. It's North that's communist. So and China as well. So you have these different jurisdictions that have different economic systems, and economic systems are interesting because they can be places of breeding equality or inequality, right? So when we talk about, I think at the heart of socialism is very positive, and the heart of socialism is actually equality. Saying that we've got this number of people in the society, how can we sort of like transfer wealth to different places, but some people are not too well off, some people are not far off. And we'll talk about the state of inequality shortly, and we'll share some statistics. But the thing about economic equality that I find very, very pressing in our generation, and I think Irungu earlier on articulated this, is the gap between the rich and the poor is at now dangerous levels. And somebody can ask, so what? Are we saying that people shouldn't be creative and innovative and earn money and things like that? And that's not what we are saying. We're just saying that if I'm earning 1 million shillings a month and somebody else is earning 10,000 shillings a month, do you know that not only do I have more economic muscle, but I have immense power over them? And that's where now economic equality becomes a really pressing issue. And now with people like, who said they want to wine and dine with Elon Musk? With people like Elon, like, what did I read? I think I read something like, even if he finishes his wealth, he can, like, I can't remember the stat. I looked for the statistic, but it's, I can't wrap my head around. It's almost like the way when I listen to corruption scandals in Kenya, and they mention Sijui, like 2 billion. Do you know how, like, I can't wrap my head around. I know what 100,000 looks like, cash. Because I remember when I went to law school, my dad took 100,000 shillings, and I saw it macho. Like, it was my first time to actually see, like, it can fit an A4 bahasha, for example. But what is 1 billion? Can 1 billion fill this room? Like, do you get what I mean? Like, it's such crazy amounts of money that the inequalities are bred from having so much money and other people have very little money. When we say that the poverty line, I think it's about $2 per day. $2 per day is 200 bob, right? And when you say 46% of Kenyans, sorry, it's $2 now. It was one for the longest. It's now 1.96, so it's about $2. That's 230 shillings, right around there. What is 230 shillings? Like, I want us to be very practical with our thinking. When you go to Java, can you spend 5K? Yes. How easily? Java is, so 5K is like a meal for 2 people? Yes. So breakfast. Okay, so if both of you have breakfast, you both have whatever, cafe. Me, I feel nothing for coffee, so cafe lattes, those espresso things. And then maybe you take away a cake for somebody. That's 5 Gs. Gone. So when you tell me that 46% of the population, let's round it to 50%, right? We can safely say half of the population lives under $2 a day. Do Do you understand the inequality that we are breeding? And the side effects of inequality are things like insecurity and crime. When you're balling, and when you can throw money, and when somebody else can't afford a meal. I think there's a time when I was at 2019 and we were doing some work in Madare, Kariobangi, and I remember majority of the people couldn't eat 3 meals a day. Actually, they almost saw it as gluttonous because unakula mara tatu kwa siku. They can't compute it. And these are the things that we're talking about when we talk about economic inequality and why it's highly dangerous. Before you were born, your destiny was predetermined for you by the forces, by the world, by the economy, by everything. And that's why this conversation on equality is very important, because we must dismantle that